A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Design Meetup powered by IxDF Kerala and co-sponsored by Experion Technologies. Explore the art of inclusive design where accessibility meets innovation and user-centeredness drives digital excellence. Discover how to ensure inclusive design when creating applications that empower all individuals regardless of their abilities or backgrounds. Our speaker, Sajith Surendran, a senior front-end developer who brings a unique perspective as a deaf and mute individual, will be taking the session in sign language. Aswathy, a skilled interpreter, will ensure that Sajith's insights are accessible to all participants by translating into speech. Our interpreter, Aswathy, has worked as an educational consultant at the National Institute of Speech and Hearing niche. Thank you, Aswathy, for joining us today to help us making this session more accessible from your busy schedule. So we may be pacing the session slightly slow since we have to sign and interpret. Also, if there are any issues from our end, any delays, I hope all of you understand. We have worked quite hard with a few demos and a lot of interactions, and it's been quite exciting for all of us at IxDF Kerala to bring this session to you. And I hope all of you will make the session very interactive. So to talk about Sajith, he has over 15 years of experience. He's curious, he's hardworking, and he puts a lot of effort in planning, tracking his, and monitoring his tasks, working outside of his regular hours to ensure that the work is delivered on time. He's someone who is constantly learning, and this keeps him passionate in his role. He's someone who goes an extra mile to interact with his team members, and with a hint of humor, a highly creative individual. So for the ease of a better experience, we've muted the audience mic during the session. Feel free to put in your questions in the chat window, although we have a Q&A session after the webinar where the audience can interact and discuss. A recorded version of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. For those joining us, welcome to Inclusion and Accessibility. Over to you, Sajith.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen and show you the PPT. My name is Sajith. And this is my sign name. What do you think is a sign name? For deaf people, like hearing people, we cannot call a person by a name. And therefore, it is the deaf culture to have a sign name. And this is my sign name because I have small eyes. Aswathy, this is Aswathy's sign name. You can see that for the deaf community to call Aswathy is difficult. So what they did was they observed her and saw that she always was wearing a sling bag. And so they gave her the sign name. This is Aswathy's sign name. Similarly, all deaf people, let's say hearing people, maybe there are different names, Arun, Vandana, and you can call them by their names. But for us to spell out their names is often a difficulty, it's a problem. So we have deaf sign names for every individual, including deaf and hearing people alike. We observe them, we look at what their characteristics are that stand out, or something that they do every day, and accordingly we give them a sign name. Today the topic is inclusive UX design put into practice. So you are all designers, and it's very important that our design process is inclusive. Our society is a very diverse society. Is everyone in the world the same? No, people are very, very different. People may be thin, fat, tall, short. It is very important that as a designer that you do not exclude a small group of people or a small population. It is important that you include everyone during your design process. And this makes sure that your final design is beneficial to a larger population. Who is inclusive design for? There are different kinds of people, like we said, different senses. But sometimes we assume that everyone has all five senses, and we think, and our perspective becomes biased. And we design for a small population, and some people do not have access to our design. There may be people who, and we call a big majority of people the normal population. But what is normal? There is no such thing as normal. Let's say, for example, I'm designing something and I am a very aware designer, and I'm thinking that I'm including everyone, I'm making a design. But sometimes you end up designing for a smaller group of people who are like me, but you are not aware that there is another group of people who are different from you, and your design does not address their issues and their needs. So when you're designing, make sure you include all kinds of people and that your design is useful to everyone alike. Inclusive design principles. Sometimes people are excluded. And why do you think that happens? Because of biased perspectives. But use inclusion as an opportunity. Let's look at how we do that. How do we solve this problem of having different perspectives in society? It is important that we discuss with different people while we are designing, and that we include these people in our process. Become open-minded. Don't be close-minded and not be comfortable interacting with people who are not like you. Make sure you include all kinds of people, interact with them, and then design for a bigger population. What you see now on screen is a persona spectrum. Here again, you can see different drawings of different kinds of people at different stages in life. There may be people who do not have an arm. There may be people who had a temporary accident and is not able to use their arm. So there are different kinds of people. So you can use this persona spectrum. Don't exclude small groups of people, but use this persona spectrum while you are designing. Make sure you include all these kinds of people. I'd like to give you an explanation. There may be deaf people, there may be people who are wheelchair users. Don't keep them aside. They're all the same. They are like you in a lot of ways. Don't say, oh no, he's hearing impaired or they cannot see, so I'm not going to interact with them. They are also people. So it's important that you include all sorts of people during your design process. I'm going to give you some examples. Say video calls. You may be hearing people, you use a phone, you call a person, you talk to them on the phone. But as a deaf person, I'm not able to speak to another person. But we have video calls. So see, we're the same, we're not all that different. Let me give you another example. A blind person uses a walking cane. At the lights, at the traffic lights, you see the red light, but the blind person may not see the red light. but they have devices that let them know that the traffic is here, maybe a vibrator's on their hand. So see, we aren't all that different. When you are designing solutions to people, earlier you saw the persona spectrum. Make sure when you are designing, you think of all sorts of people, all the people that you saw in the persona spectrum while you are designing. So you think when you're solving the problem of people crossing the roads, so make sure you have a solution for them too, and that you include them in your solution. So the hearing people, maybe they can hear the horn, and even if they don't see the red light, they might still cross the road. But for blind people, they need a visual reminder. Now let's talk about the ambulance. When an ambulance is going on the road, there's a horn. So they honk, or there's a sound, and the other cars, they know that the ambulance is right behind them and they make way for the ambulance. But say there's one car that's not moving. Perhaps the person is a deaf person because the person did not hear the sound of the ambulance. Person and has some hearing impairment. So it could be anybody who could not hear the sound of the ambulance. So then that becomes a challenge that needs to be solved. But it is important that we all move and make way for the ambulance. So what you have to come up with a solution that is useful to everyone. An old person with hearing impairment, and they are also able to move out of the way when you are coming up with a solution. Another example I'd like to give is subtitles. So the hearing population, maybe at night there might be people, family members who are asleep, maybe there is a baby sleeping in the other room, and you want to reduce the volume, or maybe even the TV may be on mute, and the subtitle is useful to the person. And a deaf person, oftentimes there is no interpreter in movies or entertainment, so the subtitle is useful for the deaf person. See, the same solution, subtitles, is helping people both deaf and hearing. There may be people in the hearing population who do not speak the same language as that's shown in the entertainment or the media, and subtitles help them too. So just one solution, subtitles, that's useful to a larger population. There are different dimensions that we have to consider. Like we talked about, a big diversity of people. So when you are designing solutions, when you are looking at the design process, it's important you use different tools. Ask yourself different questions. Think about different people. So the older generation, the elderly citizens, what percentage of the population are they? Are we solving for all kinds of people? People who are old, people who are deaf, people who are blind. So make sure you're considering them all while you are designing, and think of different ways, different methods. Make sure you address all these different dimensions, and make sure you do not exclude anyone. And if you feel that somebody has been excluded, make a conscious effort to include them in your process. We talked about how different people have different perspectives. People also have a lot of biases. There's gender bias, there can be racial biases, socio-economical biases, age-related biases. All of this arises out of diversity. People are different. People are very diverse. There may be people of other gender, people with LGBTQ. There are people of with different gender identities. But as a designer, we may have certain biases. It's very important that we keep aside this bias. You may also have disability bias as a designer. Language biases. But it's very important to consider all their problems and make sure you're coming up with a solution for all of them. Consider all their perspectives while you are designing. And this is what inclusive UX design is all about. Keeping your biases aside. How do we solve these problems that we talked about? How do we implement the UX design? User research. We need to do user research. Understand the people who are in pain or who are suffering from a problem. You need to look deep into them, include them, and understand what their problem is. Empathize with them, understand their backgrounds, and include them in your team, your design team, in your process. Make sure you use accessibility guidelines. Make sure you use the language that of the people that you, so maybe there is a group of people who do not speak the same language as you, but in such cases you make sure that you have accessibility and that you are able to communicate them without any barriers, and make sure you include all of them in your process. We talked about including different diverse groups of people. When there are guidelines that you can follow, don't never you make sure that you do not have biases and you separate people into different groups. Make sure you see them as a bigger group. Keep your minds open, change mindsets of people. Don't think that some people are right, some people are wrong. Make sure you take in that all the feedback that you're able to take in, and even negative feedback, make sure you take it in the positive sense. It's all for your growth. Make use of it to to learn from it and make better products. How to make things more accessible? There are 3 points you see in this slide. Increased access. Make sure you provide increased access. You have to make sure you reduce friction and provide more emotional context. The tools that we discussed before, make sure you use all the different tools while you are designing, and that is one way of making sure you include all people. Oops. Sorry, just a moment. I've lost. So when you are working on a design, make sure you interact with all the different diverse groups that we talked about before. Make sure you include them in your teams and that you work together. That helps you make more inclusive designs and products. Take their support and make sure you're solving all their problems. There may be small groups that are being excluded. Make sure you include them and see how you can make things more accessible to them. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my own life. I had a lot of challenges as I grew up. Being a deaf person, I could see a lot of hearing people talking around me every day. My teachers would be talking, not signing. My textbooks were inaccessible to me. Workshops were inaccessible to me. So I would sit and read and reread and reread, spend a lot of time on learning content until I understood what they were. I would make a lot of mistakes, but it didn't bother me. I kept making mistakes. I tried to get better, and that's how I learned. And in my workplace, I put in a conscious effort to be included because I knew it was important for me to develop my skills. I could see a lot of people around me, they were talking, they didn't know sign language and they didn't know my language. So I would learn from textbooks, from Google, and I would make a conscious effort to understand things and improve myself at work. So that's how I have developed my own skills. And thank you. It's the end of my presentation. So I now want, so you are all technical experts, but there are a lot of people around us, people with disabilities. But it's always important that we look at them, we try to get in touch with them, include them in our process, talk to them, understand what's going on in their minds while we are designing certain things. Sometimes there is a misunderstanding that our what we experience in our life is the same as theirs, and then we just go ahead with the design process, but that can sometimes be wrong. So that's all that I have to say.
Thank you, Sajith. Thank you, Aswathy. I think that was really interesting. A lot of things that a lot of us take for granted. I think through this session, we were able to rethink as individuals who navigate through our days regularly, and also as designers or developers working towards applications, where we can contribute, or maybe just put a little bit of thought when we design to just make it more easier for everyone to use. We actually just assume a lot of times that what we've designed is a very good UX or a good user experience. But there's a lot more for us to learn. And for this, we have to work with uh, users of all abilities to better design and come with overcoming limitations in making it more accessible. So we are moving into the question and answer session. So we would like to open up the session. Please feel free to unmute Aswathy will interpret your question and sign to Sajith so that he can take it. Okay. So Sajith, specifically, I would like to know how you got this so interested in development. My understanding is there are not many people who are in this field, and a lot of people feel that it's very difficult to get in. So I would like for you to share a little more on specifically building your skill set for this role.
Yes, what I've done is from a very young age, I've always been very interested. I've seen hearing people talk about programming, but a lot of this was never accessible to me. So when I asked them, they would say it's programming. I've never had experience before that. So I knew that a lot of hearing people had experience in programming. At first, I thought, oh, I'm deaf. I may not be able to do it. But then I thought, no, it's possible for me too. So I took up the words related to programming. I looked them up on Google. I had some friends that I knew from programming. I asked them certain words, what they meant, new words that were new to me. I couldn't understand exactly what they were saying because, of course, they were talking to me. But there were some visuals. I tried to understand things from their gestures. But I had a lot of discussions. I interacted with a lot of people. I tried to understand meanings of different words. I met new people, new webinars. I saw YouTube videos, but a lot of them, there was a lot of talking. Many of them weren't accessible, but I tried to grasp things from their facial expressions. I tried to read transcripts. I never said that this was not going to be possible for me. I looked things up, I wrote down notes. Many a times there was a lot of talking, but there was a lot of transcripts as well. So I tried to make use of all those, and that's how I continuously kept learning about things, and slowly things started to make sense to me. As a deaf person, when I understood things, I wanted to share it with my other deaf friends. Because it took me a long time as a deaf individual to pick things up from scratch. But now that I put in the effort and learn things, it is easier for me now to explain it to another deaf colleague or a deaf friend. So that's what I strive towards. I try and make things easier for my other deaf friends who are interested in programming.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sajith, Aswathy. Um, so I think I'm not seeing any questions. I have, I think I'm more curious to ask. Aswathy, this question is actually for you, but I would love for you to also, sign it. How do you think when we are working with, individuals who are deaf and dumb, like how do we equip ourselves to better communicate when we are working in design? I understand that chat is very accessible, but also how can we make go an extra mile? So Ashwati, you have built your skills in interpreting. You have your own reasons to learn the skill. But can you tell what other than learning online or just the technical learning, what can make it better for us to communicate?
So before, when first time when I joined Niche, I knew no sign at all. So my responsibility was to work with teachers who would teach the deaf population. But before I start, I would just like to correct you a little bit in the terminology that's being used. So this is the same mistake I made the first time I went to Niche. So I also said deaf and dumb. So the word dumb has a negative connotation in society. So it is not fully accepted by the deaf population. It's just deaf. But even with terminology, I would say it's an individual preference. Sign users, and they love to be called deaf. It is their identity. It's their ID that I am a deaf person. They're very proud to say I am deaf. So deaf is the word that's used for them. There are some people who use hearing aids, cochlear implants, and they prefer the word hearing impairment. So it's different for different people. It's just important that we respect their choice because it is their identity. We are no one to say who they are. So I normally ask them what they prefer, and that's the terminology I use. But the most commonly used is the word deaf. But the word dumb is no longer used because actually they are not dumb in the sense it's not that they cannot speak. It's just that they have the ability to speak, but because they cannot hear, they do not know how to speak, but they can make sounds, and if they learn, it is possible for them to speak. So dumb is a wrong terminology to use. So I thought now is a good chance to correct you because there's so many people listening, and it was a learning for me the first time I joined this. So I'm just sharing that with you. So it's
Thank you.
just there. So my experience is the best way to learn sign language, or actually even before that, if you are a designer, you're a teacher, I think the first thing is that, like he said, to become inclusive, to be aware and realize that there are people who are different from us. And like you said, we often assume that we know what they are like. Okay, he's a deaf person, he cannot hear, he cannot talk, and that's it. But there's a lot more to them. They have their own culture, which is very, very rich. And I wasn't aware the first time I joined Niche. So for me, I realized that it was important to interact with them, become one of them, to understand what the culture is. Because from the outside, what you understand is very different from what you understand when you're one among them. So I was just trying to make friends with deaf people. I would go for their workshops. They would just be signing, and I'm just standing there watching. Nothing would make sense to me. But slowly, that immersion you do was the best way to learn sign language, I believe, and also to understand their culture and to gain their trust, which is very, very important. So as a designer, if you are not truly involved, they understand. They know that you are just, you just want some input from them for the sake of inclusion, and they know when you actually mean it, you want to be one of them, you really want their input and you want it to be accessible. It's very different. So for that, I think it's important that you become one of them, spend time with them, understand their culture, learn their language a little bit, and if not, you can always use an interpreter. But making that effort to call an interpreter be with you is what makes the difference, making sure things are accessible, you understand them. So my anything that I have to say, if there's one thing, it is that you be genuine when you are trying to be inclusive, that you put in that actual effort to be one of them, and it's the insight and not what you see on the outside that is important. Because at Niche, we have met a lot. We have a department called CATI, and we have a lot of solutions coming up for people with disabilities. And I have seen engineering students and experts working on solutions, but this is the most common mistake, that they assume that they know what is happening just by observing them. But from working at Niche, I know that most of the time the final solution that comes up becomes of no use to them, just because they were not part of the team before the during the design process. So you can save a lot of time just by that step of inclusion, I think.
Thank you, Ashwati. I think we're learning a lot. One in terms of interaction, in terms of how to address a deaf person. So all of this. Again, asking the audience, you feel free to drop the question in the Q&A option or in the chat, or please unmute yourself and come and ask the question.
As Sajith was saying, at the end, after your Q&A sessions, there's certain things, maybe if he can also spend some more time explaining certain things, let's just see if there are any more questions. He's curious to know what questions you all have.
Yeah, I think Sajith, you can continue. As and when we get the questions, we can probably.
I think a lot of the hearing population, this is something I experience every day. Oh, he's a deaf person. How do I communicate with them? What's going to happen? You might have, like a starting trouble, but that's okay. I see that every day. Let me give you an example of UX design. I think it's very, very important. See, yes, I've been lecturing about it. You've been watching my lecture, but you need to know that as people with disabilities, sometimes we suffer a lot just because we don't have accessibility to a lot of things. There are people with different disabilities, with different problems. So it's very important that you be very, very open. Try to understand what their problems are, talk to them, collect all their problems, and in future make use of all the data that you collected. And then you take your solution back to them. Don't think, okay, now I've understood all their problems, now I have the right solution. Take it back to them, see if you have the right solution for them. Maybe they're thinking in a very different way. Maybe what you have come up with is not the right solution for them and they're not happy about it. So it's very important to take back what you have come up with back to them and take in their inputs again. There are different kinds of people, maybe people with mental health disorders, people with physical challenges. It's important that we include all these people. We are all human beings and make use of all their inputs and then come up with a solution, and then you'll be solving problems for the larger population. So don't think these are people with disabilities. I don't know how to interact with them. It's their problem. How do I solve their problem? And no, I don't have the confidence. I don't know much about them. So let me solve problems for my kind of people. No, it's, let's say some people with disabilities, they have accessibility. When I'm designing something, you take in ideas from people with disabilities as well, people who are blind, people who are deaf. And when you solve problems for people with disabilities, oftentimes you end up solving problems for the larger population, not just for people with disabilities. So that is the persona spectrum is very important in that aspect. AV Java, is that a technical Java? His screen is it slow for anyone else? I'm missing out certain alphabets he's signing.
I think for us it's clear. I think
It's clear. Can you try again, Sajith? Okay, he's going to send the word. Okay, Java
yeah.
plugin. Me out a little bit. I'm not a technical person. He's talking about a Java plugin. He's talking about some kind of hierarchy. He said, okay, as an interpreter, you may not have the technical knowledge, but the rest of you may understand. So when you have a Java plugin and there are different sections that come below it, so it's easy for me. Without it, it may be very difficult. So earlier the plugins, they were very, very difficult, but now it's an easy process, and it's easy. It's more accessible to us. Similarly, when you're designing things, can you just give me one? Vandana, did you understand what he's talking about?
No, I
Because
think no,
I
not
don't know
really.
what the Java plugin is, so I'm not able to understand his explanation of it.
I think you can just sign. I mean, just explain however he's saying, and
Ah,
probably if we are not able to
okay.
follow, we will ask you.
Okay. So what I have understood is he was saying when you solve problems for people with disabilities, it becomes commonly useful for everyone. So this was an example of that, I think, but I've not understood the example exactly. So you just go on.
Okay,
He was
I'm
asking,
just
did you understand the Java plugin example? So I was telling him that I didn't understand. So that's probably why many of you may not have understood.
no worries.
So as designers, you might think, okay, how do I approach a person who's deaf? How do I communicate with that person? Or I see a person on the wheelchair, oh no, what must he feel? No, it's okay, I'll just go on my own way. No, it's important that you keep an open mind. Make that effort, go to them. It's possible for hearing people to communicate with them. Just go, just call them, try to have a communication, observe them, see what they are doing, learn from them. And then you become more aware, and whatever knowledge that you have gained is very different from the knowledge that you had previously before you interacted with them. And make sure you implement all of that in your designing process, and then your solutions will be a lot better.
Thank you, Sajith. I just wanted to ask the audience if anyone wants to ask a question or share your experience. This is the first time we're having a session like this. So if anyone wants to share the experience, please feel
One thing
free.
I would like.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, Aswathy, hi, and Sajith. Uh, I just want to know that developing these kind of empathy habits, towards thinking for the people who are uh, you know um, challenged in hearing or visually. So how do we practice those kind of things? What are the procedures do we like people follow in design domain to increase that empathy behavior?
uh, Sajid says, yeah, they have a lot of challenges, people with disabilities. They have a lot of problems that they are facing. So, for example, I'm talking on the phone, but a deaf person cannot talk on the phone. Let's say 108, you want to go to the hospital. You can call the ambulance. You make a phone call immediately, 108, and the ambulance is here. But what about me? I'm a deaf person. I cannot make that phone call, let them know there is an emergency. So, if the solution is accessible, it's important that it's also accessible to me. Maybe it's a video call and there is an interpreter on the other end who can help me communicate this to the medical team. But in my house, it's I'm also an important person, so who's going to come and help me? So when you are resolving problems, when you're designing solutions, or maybe there is a chat box and then they see my message that I need help somewhere, but these solutions, or there's no interpreter services is so less in our country. So these are all problems that you need to understand of the deaf population as a designer. Make sure you have the knowledge of these problems. You can make use of an interpreter to understand these problems better, and then and then when you're solving a problem like this, the problem that I just mentioned about the medical services, your solution will be accessible to us just like it is accessible to the hearing population.
Thank you. Thank you. Understood.
I think just adding to that, Ashwati, probably how will I think Sajith mentioned the persona spectrum. So I think every input or every output of the application, how will it be accessed by different personas of the spectrum? So when we take every design decision, if we keep the spectrum, the persona, the template with us, and look at every input, every output, every interaction from each user, how will it happen? I think that's something that we can consider. Am I correct, Sajith?
Yes, he's saying that's very true.
I think
Yeah.
something to highlight. Yeah, Praveen, go ahead. Praveen?
No,
Yeah.
actually, just wanted
Jensen.
to add something which is being discussed. Like Sajith mentioned about the deep empathy part. So that is something we will have to ensure in the initial days of the research, the user research activity. There we will find out which are the user type. And Sajith also mentioned the extreme use cases, like we need to inclusive, make the users inclusive in the design and identify the extreme users. Then those users should be a persona in our design. Okay, and every solution we design or every idea we create should be validated, whether this idea or the solution solution is makes sense to the extreme use cases. Then it will be an inclusive design, the ultimate solution. Just a thought.
Yeah, thank you, Jensen, for sharing your inputs on this. I think even having a brainstorming with other designers or creators of applications and having conversations like this is very important for us to change the way we design to make it more inclusive. Yeah, Sajith.
So Sajith is saying, so when you create this team, it's important you have people with disabilities in your team. So it could be a person in a wheelchair, the different persona, maybe a deaf person who can sign, maybe a person who uses a hearing aid. Make sure all of these people are part of your team. Because there may be people who do not know the technology, and you may show something and they may say, yeah, it looks fine, it looks fine. No, don't take inputs from people like that. Make sure people who have experience with the technology, make sure you include all kinds of people. There may be deaf people, say, who does not have experience with the technology or the kind of application that you are developing, but make sure you have people who have knowledge about the kind of solutions that you are working on, from all these different kinds of personas, which include the different personas in your team, so that your solution is useful to them. Make sure you include them and interact with them at different stages of your process.
Thank you, Sajid. Thank you. Anyone else? Please, it's not just a Q&A. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Aswathy.
I think in Sajith's presentation, when I was going over it, it was slide 12, which I felt was the most impactful slide. Because there he was saying how, as designers, you have a big responsibility. Because when you are designing something, you are actually changing the mindset of the society. I have my personal experience is Netflix. What is the sign for Netflix? There is Netflix. Okay, so this is a sign for Netflix. Subtitles. There are subtitles in all different languages.
Aswathy, you said the sign for Netflix. Can you start again? Because we lost you there.
So the sign for Netflix is this. I personally think Netflix is an extremely accessible platform. It has subtitles for all people, especially for the deaf. It has different languages subtitles. So now, me personally, I watch different language movies, and it's not a problem anymore. Chinese, Korean, because you have English subtitles and it's easy to follow. But it's accessible to the deaf people as well. And I don't know how many of you are aware, but in Netflix you have something called a voice, like a I forgot what it's called. It's an accessibility feature for the blind people. So it's got an audio description. So when a blind person is watching, they have no visuals on TV, but Netflix offers the option for an audio description. So apart from what is being spoken, in the background, the person can also hear description of what you see or what the person is doing. So it becomes very accessible to the blind person. I don't know any other platform which has this accessible feature. So Netflix has put in that effort. And also, if you look at Netflix shows, their own personal shows, they have people from all this persona spectrum, LGBTQ. They have people of disabilities who are superheroes, who are the main characters. So in society, people's mindsets are changing by watching a lot of Netflix, because this becomes normal. Subtitles become normal. Having a deaf Superman becomes normal. So I think as designers, you also have this big responsibility. You are able to impact society by making sure your designs, your technical designs, are fully accessible and inclusive. So I
We've lost Aswathy. Yeah, Aswathy, so you were going to say about what? So I personally, and then we lost you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was a long time ago. I was just saying that as designers, I think you are changing the culture in society. You're changing their mindsets. If you are inclusive and accessible when you're designing solutions, then when society is using this design, their mindset is changing. They're thinking more inclusive. Maybe, like he said, a person before who never thought of a deaf person, now deafness becomes normal because of you as designers, because you've made it normal. So I think your responsibility is big and you can make a big impact in society. So I felt the 12th slide was the best in the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Ashwati. I think that is a great perspective. In terms of language accessibility, language not being a limitation and sound not being a limitation, visuals not being a limitation, and culture and a lot of things like media, advertisements, film can really impact and change the way people think. So that was a great example. So Sajith, we have a question for you from Vivek. So he's asking about, what are products that are designed considering these things. It could be any application that you think is best. Could be in India or, any application abroad.
I would say WhatsApp is very, very accessible to everyone, especially as the deaf population. It has visual, it has audio, you can communicate to people, you can call them, video call them. I think WhatsApp is number one on my list. It's useful to everyone. All deaf people are extremely happy using WhatsApp. It's extremely accessible, but a lot of other designs, a lot of other applications are many a times not accessible to us deaf individuals. So I think it's important to include ideas to make sure that it's many applications, they're somewhat the same in terms of accessibility, because it does not think it, we are not part of their process when it's developed. So we are not thought about when it's developed. So we are not included. So I hope there are more applications that think of us, that consider us and our needs.
And I think that's a great example. I mean, that's something that we use every day, and it's nice to know that they include everyone. Yeah. Can you maybe cite a bad example? Can be a product, need not be an application, can be a product.
Gym. Sorry, I'm listening. Health, yoga. Oh, different health applications. It's many a times it's always, it's got a voice aspect to it more than any visual aspects to it. A lot of people talking without any subtitles, so we don't know what is being said, why is something useful or why is something being done. I'll give you another example. At the railway station, there's a lot of audio, a lot of announcements being made, and that's not accessible to us. Sometimes there's some visuals informing us of when the train is coming, which platform, but sometimes it gets very, very confusing for us. We know there are different platforms, platform 1, platform 2. Sometimes we're sitting at the second platform and they say, sorry, your train will be coming in platform number 4. So we followed the visual when at the entrance, but then the announcement is being made and we miss out and we miss the train. So this has happened before. So that is a big problem for us. So I think visual is very, very important. In Kollam, so when we are driving, when the train is moving in Trivandrum, we don't know which direction the train is going to go. So sometimes that's also a big confusion for us. In the US, when a flight comes, Have you noticed how the train ticket is so confusing? Can you make out what's written in the train tickets here? And it doesn't mention which direction the train is going to come, which direction we need to go. So there's a lot of confusion. So nothing is accessible. In the ticket, when you're booking the ticket, it's all so messed up in your ticket. Things are written over lines. It's not clear. Nothing makes sense to us, and that's a big problem for us because that's the main information for us deaf people. So I would say the railway system itself is extremely not accessible to us. So in India, we know we have gotten used to this. But let's say somebody from abroad, someone from America, someone from China, they visit us in India and they need to take the train. It's going to be extremely confusing for them. There's no accessibility. This is a very simple problem that can easily be solved. So it's very important that something like this should be solved, that it makes sense to everyone alike.
I think that's thank you, Sajith. Shruti. I have a question on emergency services. In terms of how it is currently in India, you mentioned what are some best practices in making it accessible?
So the ambulance, I said, service is not accessible in India. There's an SOS. You know what that is? So you have a heart attack and you fall down. So there is a way to contact them. But here in India, it's for us. There's nothing like that. In the US, sometimes there's something on your watch. You can just press the button and the service is there to help you. But here in India, there is no such thing. This is a very easy solution. So I don't know why that still does not exist here in India. But in the US, you know there are it's very easy. You have on your watch, you press a button and they are informed that you're not well, and the ambulance service is there immediately to take you to the hospital. Everything is very accessible, but it's not the same here in India. As a deaf person, if I have an immediate heart attack, there is no one next to me. This is a very automatic service. It's very easy, but I don't know why it's still not available here in India.
But Ashruti, I have again a question for Sajith. You're talking about a person with a advanced watch or a phone, right? Is there any other ways that we can make it accessible?
So I think I don't have a solution for it right now. In China, I'm sure they make technology at a very low cost. So I'm sure it's possible. It needn't always be an expensive solution. Sometimes, yes, in the US, products may be a little more expensive, but Chinese products we know aren't as expensive. So it's always possible to make solutions without being so expensive.
I think I have this question is for the audience, for us to think of something different, which is accessible in terms of cost also. I mean, we can give high technology as an option, but anyone wants to ask a question or?
Hi, Sajith. Siddharth this side. I
Yeah,
have
hi.
no question.
Would you
Aswathy,
like to share
Yes.
your
I
experience?
mean, I don't have anything to share. I just want to thank Sajith for taking this session. Actually, it's just like, it gave us different perspective, and I mean, it's a eye opener for me also. I don't even think about train or anything. Just want to thank you for this. And yeah, I mean, I will look different perspective in different things now. So I just want to thank you that that this thanking thing. So
Thank you.
And I
Thank
will
you.
definitely connect with Sajith after this. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Especially
you,
happy to
Siddharth.
meet you.
Yeah, and thank you. I think we've spoken about deep empathy. I think that's what interacting with all kind of individuals to develop that deep empathy. Um, and that does not mean sending a message, but actually spending time to understand, not just by observation, by asking. Yeah, we have a question. Hello? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Aswathy, I'd like for you to share your closing comments, and if any.
I just like to share one point. I am someone who believes deeply in personal choice, but I think people with disabilities are often not given that choice just because things aren't accessible to them. So they don't have the choice to make a choice, whereas we have a lot of choices that we can make. So sometimes it saddens me to see that they don't have the same choices that we have just because we haven't given them that opportunity. So it is actually our responsibility. If you look at it, you can see they're putting in a lot of effort. So why not we also make a little bit of effort? My husband is a para Olympian, so he's a shooter. So I accompanied him to the last Olympics, and I had goosebumps when I was at the Olympic village because I saw people of all different kinds of disabilities interacting with each other with absolutely no barriers. So it felt like utopia to me. But I still have goosebumps when I think about it. But that just shows me that it is possible with a little bit of effort. Yes, of course, it takes more effort. Maybe it's a little more expensive, but it is something I think we have to do so that we are all at the same level. Because I think they also have a lot to contribute. If only we would listen to them, I think the society can do a lot better than we do right now. So, yeah, that's all.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think we should be better listeners, open our hearts, and open our mind to inclusion. Ashwati, I also wanted you to add probably some points on the limitations of uh, technical terms in sign language currently in India. I would like probably both of you to add to that, Sajith.
So in sign language, there's a company, DAD, DAAD. It's a new idea by a deaf team of people. We're doing a lot of research. We are trying to create signs for technical terms, and we want it to be uniform across India. And this is focused on technical terms, not all terms, but technical terms. I would also like to add sign language. I don't know how many of you are aware. Sign language is a very in-depth language. It might seem like just gestures, but it's very different from gestures. It has all grammatical aspects, just like English, Malayalam, all the different languages that we speak. It's exactly the same. And it's different in different countries. So we have Indian Sign Language in India. In the US, it's very different. They have American Sign Language. And the reason for that is it's culturally based. So I can just give you one example. In India, the sign for marriage is this, because it's the Indian culture where the husband and the wife, they hold hands at the ceremony, but it's not the same in the US. So it's always different there. I think it is this. Yes, I believe it's this because it's a ring exchange. So it's very culture based. But in India, again, because deafness and sign language was not so researched, not it doesn't have a huge history. So it's a very recent development that's happening. It is possible to communicate any concept in sign language, in Indian Sign Language. But like Vandana said, there is a limitation at the moment. A lot of technical terms in sign language are missing. There are a lot of people deaf who are really working on this currently. I know Nish is working on it. I know people like DAD is another company that's working on it. They want to formalize these words so that it becomes part of the Indian Sign Language, so that in future.
Lost Ashwati. Ashwati, so in future, and then we lost you.
Just that now, hopefully in future, these words will all become formalized and there will not be a limitation going forward, that we will have the same number of words in sign language as we have in spoken language.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sajith, want to just add one more thing. In the US, sign language is very different from Indian sign language. But if American deaf people look at a deaf person in India using Indian Sign Language, it is possible for them to make sense of what is being signed. But sometimes it's not, it's vice versa is not the case. For us in India, if we look at them, sometimes it doesn't make sense to us. We sign very, very naturally, it comes very fluently to us. So he says sign language has a lot of expression. Expression is a big, it's a grammatical component of sign language. So sometimes you might think you don't know signs and you cannot understand them, but actually you will notice that if you are trying to communicate with a deaf person, you're a hearing person who does not know sign, you might be shocked to realize that you make sense of a lot of things that is being signed to you just out of the expression.
Yeah, I think communicating the tone, I think it was really interesting. Listening to what you were saying, Ashwati, and also looking at Sajith and understanding the tone, that was very interesting. So thank you so much. I'd like to conclude by sharing a very interesting quote shared by Sebi in the chat. People have impairments, but there is no disability until someone designs something that isn't accessible. Gareth Ford Williams. I'd like to thank each and everyone who took their valuable time from a busy day to attend this webinar. Special thanks to all the participants who actively participated in the Q&A. Praveen, Jinsen, Vivek, Siddharth, Sebi. Thank you to all the volunteers of the IxDF team that work behind the scenes to make this event happen. Please do write to us and let us know how you found this session. We are available on social media like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram at IxDF Kerala. You can also write to us at idfkerala@hotmail.com. We have an IxDF design community in Interaction Design Foundation on their website. A special thanks to Sajith and especially Ashwati for finding the time. There were interactions before the session. So Ashwati, I know you're finding time just to make this session accessible for everyone, for Sajith, for all of us. So a special thank you, Ashwati, for interpreting this session for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and hope to see you all in the next session. Until then, stay safe and stay tuned. Thank you.